What's happening? What's happening? I said, what's happening, blues people? We say that again, Mrs. Pearlie.
What's happening? What's happening, blues people?
Yes. You know, she's gonna jack my line again, but that's okay. What's going on, blues people? Yet another Sunday evening. We're going to be talking about a few things. I just want, first and foremost, let me know, as usual, do you hear me? Do you hear us? Are you tuned in? How was your week? How was your weekend? Ours was good. You know, we were what was the thing we went to yesterday? What was the name of it? It was, I don't want to say it was at the square, it was up and down Kirkwood. Oh, it was good. Great music. Great music. Service was great today. We're going to talk about who controls American history. We're going to deal with Smithsonian. We're going to deal with Tuskegee and the regulation of Black culture. Okay? So we're covering the two current controversies, though. I want to be clear, Blues Tribe. We are covering it as cultural and traditional news, okay? The congressional and executive branch scrutiny of the Smithsonian Institution and Tuskegee University's new student dress expectations. Now, Mrs. Pearlie, notice the term I use. Young Pearlies, notice the term I use. Dress expectations. Okay? I didn't say dress code. I didn't say uniform. I said dress expectation. Because this is not only a discussion about bipartisan democracy crap. It's not only a debate over whether college students should dress casually or should they be allowed to dress casually. But our concern is how institutions exercise authority over culture, tradition, history, memory, and representation. But we also have to understand one thing, how we approach institution, culture, tradition, history, memory, and representation. Because, you know, on the one end, we're talking about an institution that seems to be yet again rewriting, or if not rewriting, extracting from history the story. But on the other side, we're talking about an institution that is trying to implement structure to represent tradition and move forward a respectable version of ourselves, right? So the Smithsonian helps construct the public story of the United States. Tuskegee is a historic Black institution that helps form young people for professional and community life. When either institution changes what may be presented, worn, remembered, or recognized, does that become cultural news? What I think is cultural news is the idea of, when it comes to Tuskegee, I think what's cultural news about Tuskegee is the idea that they are pushing a culture that is representative of Black success and excellence and achievement. Something that Booker T. Washington, who establishes and creates this school, was a champion of, and why he made the school, right? What's cultural news about the Smithsonian is the fact that America as we know it, not the America of the indigenous, but the America that is the grandchild of the colony, there's a culture of rearranging stories and histories for particular purposes, usually none for those, they say, of color, those that is indigenous, and those that are poor and not so well off. So tonight's central question is, who has the authority to decide what, matter of fact, let me look at the people when I ask this question. And what's happening with you? Remember, this is a conversation, reciprocal. Everything we do represents the well, okay? So tonight's question, and I read, who has the authority to decide what counts as American history? What counts as legitimate Black indigenous memory? And what forms the Black cultural presentation, okay? Or what forms of Black cultural presentation are acceptable in public institutions? Now, I find it intriguing, which is why we're talking, besides the fact, and you know, when you see me look over, I'm talking to Mrs. Purley, besides the fact that these two things are in the news right now, I don't know how many people know about the Smithsonian situation. I'm sure a lot of people know about, I don't know how many, well, you know what, let me take that back. I don't know how many people know about Tuskegee, and I don't know how many people know about the Smithsonian situation. But both of those things are prevalent in the news right now, which is one reason why we're talking about it. But that's really not why we're talking about it together. We're talking about it together because as I asked the question, I want you to understand we're talking about the idea of representation from two institutions. Now, the African American Museum in Washington is part of the institution. And when I say part of the institution, one of the institutions that the bigger institution is trying to, if not change, diminish, right? But what we're actually seeing here is, on the one end, an institution representative of Black indigenous folk of the South implementing something to try to instill professionalism, self-respect, and the like. Now, I'm not saying that the young folk that dress in a particular way do not exhibit these things, but that institution is trying to implement something for the betterment of the people they serve. On the other hand, the Smithsonian, who may be trying to implement the people they serve, but they're actually trying to minimize, stop, or change the culture and or narrative, right? So these two things simultaneously, they intersect as institutions of the Americas, right? And how American history, culture, and tradition maybe being tested, definitely, yeah, I would say being tested, being troubled, right? So remember the question. Matter of fact, I'm going to send a question to the production team so they could throw that up. Who has the authority to decide what counts as American history, what counts as legitimate Black indigenous memory, and what forms of Black cultural presentation are acceptable in public institutions? Now, we're going to start with the Smithsonian, but I just want to say, as we talk about Black cultural presentation in public institutions, there are Black folk that are not happy with the fact that there is a move. That was the word I was looking for, but there was a move to try to implement some sort of dress expectation. I saw one brother talking to Lamont Hill, and and what he was explaining was very relevant. This perpetuates an engagement between Black students and security and officers, right? depending on who is implementing and pushing these laws, right? But at the same token, we want to ask the question, though we want the autonomy to do what we want to do, identify how we want to identify, present ourselves how we want to present ourselves, is there not a time and a place for everything? Okay? Think about that. But before we get to that, I want to show something. And then we're going to get into some things. All right? I want to show something. You all ready? We're going to Let's see.
Thank you, the Honorable Chairman, Mr. Tim Burchett, my friend. Thank you, Ms. Stansberry, and all the panelists that have come today. I have enormous concern about what is happening at the museum structure, particularly under the Trump administration. History is not something that we seek to change or bend. History was taking place before we arrived. History is something that we should learn from. And to the degree that Mr. Trump, specifically on the 4th of July of 2026, took further attacks at the National Museum of African American History, I thought was very concerning. And he says that it is divisive, that we should show the happier side of American in slavery, that we should show things that we have to unify us. I think what unifies us is the truth. Mr. Blight, I would ask you, Dr. Blight, from your historical perspective, what does it say about a society that cannot reconcile its history, its truth, and where are we now?
Well, for one thing, it says it's a mature society. History's never easily reconciled. One example, members here today have said that America is unique, exceptional, and great because we ended slavery. Actually, it is far closer to a historical truth that America is unique and exceptional in that it took a massive all-out civil war to end slavery. We are the only country or empire in the world that killed 700,000 of its own people in order to no longer have slavery. We have all become abolitionists now. We all like to celebrate America ended slavery. But if we don't know the process by which we got to that point, we know next to nothing.
So right there says a heck of a lot, right? And if y'all remember a few weeks ago, matter of fact, I keep forgetting to find, if not the documentary, clips. Maybe I'll find it when Mrs. Pearlie reads some of our sponsor breaks. Because there was a time when a journalist was going around the white community as they were building the curriculum, and they was building a course on American history, and our white nation was very clear. Well, at least the white folk the journalist spoke to was very clear to say they know what happened. They know what America did to its Black and Indigenous peoples, but we don't want to know about it. We don't want our kids to be taught about this. So now, what the gentleman was saying, what was his name? Dr. What? Dr. Blight was explaining that, yes, we have made it past that. Yes, everyone at this point is abolitionist in his words, and we've eradicated to a degree at least legal slavery outside of the prison system, right? But what he's suggesting is not understanding what that was and how we got to this point is detrimental. Let's go to slide 2. So as we set up, and I explained why I thought it was significant and essential to speak both of these what I call cultural news pieces today, I want you all to understand that the Smithsonian controversy and the Tuskegee story are not necessarily the same kind of event. Now, I would not call Tuskegee a controversy whatsoever. Brother Gabriel, what's happening? Americana's grandson, always riding with us. I wouldn't call what's going on at Tuskegee controversial. We have way more things happening that take precedence than that. However, I think it is a significant moment to remind folk how culture and tradition implemented in such a way is not the biggest significance, but very significant, right? I think so yeah, right. So the Smithsonian dispute involves federal political power, congressional oversight, executive orders, funding, museum governance, and the interpretation of national history. And this is everything that has to do with archaeology, anthropology, folklore, ethnomusicology, all the ecologies, sociology, oral history, right? It asks whether elected officials should be able to pressure historians and curators to present a more affirmative national narrative. So now we're talking about what is the term of this? Man, I used to use this term all the time. Romantic nationalism, I believe it's called. And this is something that is yeah, romantic nationalism. I need to give you all the definition of this because you need to understand why that is important and essential to this conversation, okay?
How many people, I'm curious to our listeners, how many people have heard of the conversation happening in Congress about the Smithsonian, the congressional hearings? And two, what are your thoughts about the dress code that Tuskegee University is implementing again or stressing? Is that the word?
Yeah, you can say that.
Okay.
You can say that. Now, I want to be clear why romantic nationalism is very important in this conversation. Those of you who are of my feeling discipline of folklore, you all right? Okay. Those of you who are of my feeling discipline of folklore should know what romantic nationalism is and means and where it comes from, okay? So I'm gonna give you all a little history on this. Well, I don't know if I'm gonna give you history, but I'm gonna give you a definition of what it is, okay? Romantic nationalism is the idea that a nation is defined not only by government or territory, but by a shared cultural spirit expressed through folklore, language, music, customs, oral tradition, landscape, and ancestral memory. Now, from a folkloristic perspective, it describes the process by which selected traditions are collected, celebrated, and presented as evidence of a unified national identity. Okay? So, folklorists also, and I know this for a fact because this is my discipline as well as ethnomusicology, critique it because the traditions chosen to represent the nation are often idealized, standardized, or separated from original communities, while the histories and cultures of marginalized groups may be minimized or excluded. Do y'all understand what that means? So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to give the definition to the production team so they could post that in the chat. You guys need to understand what this is saying. I'll go as far as saying when the Nazi regime pretty much was based on romantic nationalism. Okay? So most of these regimes that not only marginalize but exclude the indigenous of their countries, continents, and the like, and propagate an identity, a unified identity of what was the word? What they consider supreme. See what I'm saying? So the reason why I'm going there with it, because I'm going to say it again. The Smithsonian dispute involved federal political power, congressional oversight, executive orders, funding, museum governance, and the interpretation of national history. It asks whether elected officials should be able to pressure historians and curators to present a more affirmative national narrative. So ultimately, ultimately, we're talking about nationalism. And there's nationalism across the board, but is it right for anyone? Okay, what does Brother Gabriel said? Been hearing, listening to the Smithsonian situation. I'm listening to the people on Tuskegee and not centering. I dig it. And I appreciate that. And you know, when it comes to Tuskegee, I'm happy you said Anglo-Eurocentric perspectives. One of the arguments that I heard from a Black scholar in regards to the Tuskegee dispute, maybe it wasn't an argument, it was a description. How can we represent or show value in Black culture without succumbing to a Eurocentric idea of what that representation is, right? And thank you, Brother Gabriel, for bringing that up, because what actually reminded me about that statement, because I don't think it's Eurocentric for an institution serving the community to want them to practice professionalism. I remember, I stopped and laughed because Black folk listening, those that articulate, have you ever been told you speak white? White folk that's been around Black folk, have you ever heard one Black folk tell another Black folk that they sound white because they articulate? To me, what you're ultimately saying when you say an articulate Black person sounds white, you're ultimately saying Black folks sound ignorant, and when they don't sound Black. Exactly. So when you're telling or suggesting that a Black student should appear professional, and that seems to be a problem, or you attribute it to a Eurocentric or Western ideology, you are then again saying that professionalism is not Black. See, I think what the conversation should be is, okay, so that means if my cultural or religious garb that I wear daily is, how can I, or not how can I, is this considered professional? Are you saying that what I have to wear as a, whatever I practice, are you asking the people to not wear that? No. They're ultimately telling people, don't come to school, don't come to class in your pajamas.
That's all. Straight like that.
You know what I'm saying? Okay, so the Tuskegee dispute is an internal university policy debate. The university says it is strengthening standards to prepare students for the workforce and to reinforce the expectations of a historic institution. And if anybody knows Booker T. Washington, they should know why this is being implemented or familiar with him, because if you know him, you're a ghost, right? Because he's been dead 100 years, but you get the point. Critics argue that parts of the policy stigmatize Black cultural practices and place the burden of racial bias on students rather than on the institutions that discriminate against them, which is the problem I have.
Not discrimination.
Right. Well, that's right. Thank you. Let me rephrase that. I don't have that problem. I'm not saying that's the issue. I have an issue with that argument because we do need to be accountable. Would you go to a job interview with a do-rag, a bonnet, and your pajamas?
Would you go to a restaurant?
Well, yes, we've seen it. Some restaurants, you can go with T-shirts and basketball shorts. Some you cannot. There's a time and a place for everything. There is an establishment for everything. The connection, though, to these two situations, not necessarily that the federal government and Tuskegee are doing the exact same thing. The connection is that both stories concern approved representation. One regulates the story of the nation, the other regulates how Black students represent themselves inside a Black institution. Simultaneously, one regulates the story by creating policy to make it a unified national ideology. The other one is working to set up their students for success. Next slide, please. And I'd say I came across a statement, and someone was saying, I think they were from Tuskegee, and they were actually, and I'm about to play something again from the Smithsonian first. I got some things I want to play for Tuskegee as well, but I came across something. I believe it was a young lady or older lady. I believe it was a woman scholar, a Black woman scholar, and I believe she was from Tuskegee, and she was explaining that this idea of this dress expectation and or dress code, however you want to word it, but I believe it's a dress expectation. We said we're going to discuss that. I'll tell you why. I'll have somebody else explain it. When I say somebody else, I'll play something for you in a bit. But the Black woman scholar, I can't call her name to mind. It was like they have so many more drastic issues like living conditions, the lack of funding, and all these other things, that the idea of a dress code or dress expectation being a thing is ridiculous. Um, and I personally beg to differ, right? Outside of the idea of believing that professionalism is a thing, mind you, I did a little video a couple of days ago. I was a young man. I wore a do-rag outside, but at the same time, there was a time and a place for these things, right? But I will say I beg to differ, because in the midst of all these other issues that are going on in HBCUs, and the fact that they may or may not be working on it, I couldn't tell you what is really going on. I can tell you what I believe is going on. I have to believe that this dress expectation is twofold, right? On the one hand, it is preparing and practicing professionalism and success and responsibility and accountability. But on the other hand, on the other side of that, it is disseminating a higher morale. If all these things are happening, if there's bad living, and I don't want to say if, we know some of the things that are going on. We know it's underfunded. We know the dorms and the different things that are going on through a multitude. We know about the ones that are closing down. But one is still no excuse. But what I'm saying is the idea of still having a high value of morale, and because I can just see someone saying, well, shit, I got mice running around, I could barely live in this place, or blah blah blah, but I need to get dressed up to go to. No, you didn't know. That's the response of low morality. You do still need to get dressed. You do still need to feel the value. Booker T. Washington, we're going to get into Booker T. Washington in a minute. Let me talk about history in present day resource. Remind me to get into Booker T. Washington and his ideology and what he faced when he was putting the school together. Remind me to get into the Rosenwald schools. Okay? Because the Rosenwald schools and the things that Booker T was installing in our people. So why are these things? Why are these things happening now? History is not only information about the past. Historical interpretation influences citizenship, policy, education, public spending, institutional legitimacy, and national identity. There goes that word again, right? That term, national identity. A history that centers liberty, innovation, military victory, and upward mobility supports one understanding of the United States. Remember how they say the victor tells the story, right? I appreciate you, good brother. However, a history that also centers slavery, prisoners of war, indigenous dispossession, segregation, racial violence, labor exploitation, and resistance supports a more contested understanding of the nation. Meaning the question is not whether the first set of subjects belong, because it does. The question is whether the second set may be reduced because it complicates, here we go again, national celebration. Romantic nationalism. That's what I should have called this episode. Romantic nationalism. I may have to do an entire episode on romantic nationalism. No, yes, I do it. Not today. And I'm going to tell you why. Most people don't know what I gave a definition, and then I gave a folkloristic definition. Most people don't know what that is and how that serves the empire and the prison planet. What came out of romantic nationalism, right? And the more we think about what's going on, the more I feel its presence. So now the United States marked the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence in 2026. Ironically, the United States is 250 years old, and they talk about slavery was 400 years, and they talked about that 30 years ago. And I want to say segregation laws. I think segregation law. There were segregation laws that within the last 5 to 10 years recently were eliminated in Mississippi 5 to 10 years ago. And in the 70s, crazy, right? And in the 70s, like I've been telling you the last several weeks, exploited labor on plantations was rectified in the mid 70s. So when we're talking about the celebration, the 250th celebration, we're already missing 200 years. And then we're acting as if most of this stuff was 250 years ago. You know what I'm saying? I don't know why somebody's calling me right now.
You know, good time for an ad break.
Please.
Tonight's discussion is about what happens when institutions narrow, misinterpret, or remove community history. That is the reason this preservation work exists. The Jack Dapper Blues Heritage Preservation Foundation works to preserve Black traditional music, oral history, folklore, community memory, and the cultural history of the blues people. We treat the testimony of elders, artists, musicians, family historians, and community knowledge keepers as central historical evidence, not as material that wait for outside validation. Through broadcasts, interviews, public programs, workshops, field documentation, educational resources, and preservation initiatives, we help communities record and interpret their own experiences. The work protects the cultural context surrounding songs, photographs, family records, church histories, local customs, migration stories, and the traditions that official archives have often ignored or misrepresented. Your support helps us produce cultural news, record oral histories, build community center archives, develop courses and workshops, and create public platforms where Black people can define their own stories. Schools, libraries, museums, businesses, organizations, and individuals can participate through sponsorship, underwriting, partnership, workshop bookings, and donations. Learn more and support the work at jackdapperbluesradio.tv.
Word. And listen, thank you. I want to be very clear. We advocate for all communities, folk groups, and the like to document their peoples. Okay? Don't forget we have Beyond the Romance of the Field, which is a great course. Okay? We have Blues People, Music and Folklore, another great course which you should take after Beyond the Field, and then follow it up with Black Junk Archiving. So let me get through this point, and then I want to show you all something real quick, and then we're going to show a couple of things because this 250th year anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, which I could do a whole show on that as well, right? intensifies the struggle over national memory. Because now we're talking about who remembers what and why, or what memory we want to discuss. So in folklore, and I'm sure in other, and ethnomusicology, but in folklore, and I'm sure in other disciplines, we discuss memory often, because memory is a tricky thing. You can have a collective memory, and that collective memory, meaning a group of people telling, if not the same, a similar story, and it's for a purpose. Why did they remember it that way, right? We have a situation, I mean, y'all don't understand how many episodes I could, matter of fact, I won't do it as an episode. Become a paid member of my Substack, become a paid member of my Patreon, and there we will discuss romantic nationalism in detail, and we will discuss the idea of memory and the idea of why groups of people, what makes them have these memories and tell these stories the way they do. The idea of oral history from the people versus and juxtapose oral history from the establishment. So one side wants a unifying account that emphasizes ideals and accomplishment, while the other argues that the ideals cannot be understood without the people who were excluded, executed, and the whole thing from them, and the movements that forced the nation to expand its promises. Because remember all the treaties that were broken. Remember all the treaties. Let me share something with y'all. And remember what Dr. Is it Blight? Dr. Blight said something similar to what I'm just explaining. Okay? Y'all with me? Let me know, let me know, let me know.
Donald Trump is working overtime to turn our museums into instruments of MAGA propaganda, rather than places where American people and visitors from around the world can encounter our factual history. I had the privilege this weekend of visiting the Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, Tennessee, a Smithsonian affiliate. And what I took in there was factual, it was powerful, it was equal parts devastating, visiting our factual places where American people and visitors.
I don't know if y'all was able to hear it, so let me just start it over.
Turn our museums into instruments of. Donald Trump is working overtime to turn our museums into instruments of MAGA propaganda, rather than places where American people and visitors from around the world can encounter our factual history. I had the privilege this weekend of visiting the Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, Tennessee, a Smithsonian affiliate. And what I took in there was factual, it was powerful, it was equal parts devastating and also instructive, which is why people are working so hard to erase it. And let me just be clear, try as you might to erase Black history and to erase Black people, you cannot erase us. But I digress. The work of our museums is so very important. Dr. Hardig, that work deserves visibility, gratitude, protection, not vilification and threats. Since taking office, the Trump administration has become synonymous with fascism. While there is no one set definition, historians have generally agreed upon several characteristics. Dr. Blight, you were selected to be the president of the Society of American Historians, so I'm going to ask you to keep me honest on this. Now, what I've learned is that fascism usually includes elements like undermining fair elections, a constant targeting of vulnerable people and labeling them as enemies, and an overwhelming amount of government corruption. Sounds eerily familiar, a damning and devastating deja vu of the moment we find ourselves in right now. The element I want to focus on today is the fascist hostility to our history, academia, museums, and the arts. Dr. Blight, looking at history, why do fascists and autocrats attack cultural institutions like museums?
Madam Congressman, it's because they believe that's where you can control people's minds. You can sustain a social order, you can control education, you can control the arts, you can control writing and creativity itself. It is not just the Nazis, there have been plenty of other neo-fascist or fascist regimes that have attempted to do that.
Thank you, Doctor. Yeah, this is and
Did you hear this? Are you listening to this?
Agenda-driven, propaganda-driven.
Agenda-driven, propaganda-driven. This is romantic nationalism at its finest. Not to mention, one of the main things that I didn't really go into yet, but this attack on an educational institution, but a museum is a different type of educational institution. It is not like a school. A museum is a space where you walk into, encounter, engage history of a place. And a lot of times, those installations have to be approved, if not all the time. Well, all the time they have to be approved. Some come from the inside, some are, what's the term when you ask someone to do something, bring it in? Commissioned. So, all right, some are from the inside, some are commissioned, and then some are when folk submit and apply, and I have this, but all of these things have to be approved, right? I had the opportunity to speak to the folks who put together the African American Museum in Washington, D.C. Not only did I have the opportunity to interview them, but I had the opportunity to really speak to them in detail. And they went about collecting things for that museum the way we as folklorists and ethnomusicologists and community cultural workers and scholars do. They pretty much just went to a church and invited everyone down. It was like, hey, listen, we're putting an archive together of materials that represent you. If you want to bring something down, and this is how it works, right? And I'm saying it like this because if you control the museum or the story of the museum, the story the museums tell, essentially, right? So now, when I'm telling you that indigenous people of the Americas were called Negroes, when I'm telling you that Columbus, the Portuguese king and queen, and Africans were already coming over here as merchants, and Columbus, his brother, the Portuguese king and queen, and then another empire was like, well, let's talk to these Africans because there's another area that we can go take resources from. Oh, they're Black too? So now I'm reading this to you from Revealing America's Dark-Skinned Past. I'm reading this to you from Black people are indigenous to the Americas, but then somebody goes to the museum, say, well, wait a minute. The museum doesn't say that. Now, when it comes to Tuskegee, the policy also arrives during a broader debate about higher education, employability, student conduct, institutional reputation, and the meaning of professionalism. And let's be clear, as someone who is in a field and discipline, institutional representation and reputation is a thing. You have to be able to prove that your field and discipline is viable and people will buy into it. When I say buy into it, I don't mean that maliciously. I mean, is this a discipline and field that can produce work? Is this a discipline and a field that can produce professionalism? Courses, disciplines, departments are being closed by the tons, particularly those of ethnic backgrounds.
Who told them they can decide our value?
Who told them they can decide our value? And that's the name. That's actually the name of tonight's show. Who controls America's or American history? So when we're thinking about this, in a competitive and often hostile labor market, some Black institutions not only believe now, but always believed Black institutions must overly prepare students for the scrutiny. Again, right now, we're specifically speaking about a Booker T. Washington school. Who's listening? Are y'all not paying? Who knows who Booker T. Washington is? What was Booker T. Washington saying in the days that he put the school together? What was his argument with W.E.B. Du Bois? What was, I mean, I can go down the list of the people because, you know, I am not a Pan-Africanist. I'm not knocking it. But who comes after Booker T? That was the Jamaican fellow.
Garvey?
Marcus Garvey had a problem with W.E.B. Du Bois as well. Let me play something for you all real quick that has to do with Tuskegee, because the reason I'm getting really caught up with the Smithsonian situation, because as a cultural worker, as someone who does public programming for museums and institutions, and someone who works with communities to document and archive their narrative, someone who is working the blues narrative, this is something that's dear and near to me. However, the idea of professionalism with my people, and not just my people, people period, is very serious. But hold on, let me show y'all something real quick.
I just want to state now more than ever, everyone should be documenting their family's history, having the conversation. They're trying to dismantle our history, change the narrative. Now more than ever, you know, prior to us starting the African American Folklorists and the Jack Dapper Blues Heritage Preservation Foundation, we heard people say, you know what, we don't have a story. Every other culture has a story. We don't have a story. Start today. Start now to tell your story.
And
There
you can
is
come.
no excuse, especially with these type of conversations that are going on and everything else that's happening in the world as a distraction. This is happening behind the scenes.
And you can come to
Bless you.
Jack Dapper Blues Heritage Preservation Foundation. God bless you, and African American folklorists to get the tools of how to document your people. Let's listen. I'm a fan of Yvette Cornell. Let's listen to what she has to say about this.
I think I have been annoyed all week with this dialogue that I've been hearing, right? To the point to where I felt that we had to make a show, which I really don't think should be a show. I think this show is a distraction. I saw a lot of people talking about, well, why we got to talk about all the stuff that's going on? We're talking about bonnets because y'all made bonnets y'all made this kind of thing controversial. It's not controversial. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to find it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to find it for you. And we're going to get it together and we're going to talk about it, not for a long time, because I don't want it to be worth a long time. My goodness. Listen, Lord have mercy. Have mercy. My God. Listen, HBCU introduces dress code, cell phone, and attendance policies. Now, I want to say one thing first of all. I don't really think that this is a dress code. If I tell you that you have to wear a uniform, I think that amounts to a dress code. If I tell you that you have to wear khakis and button downs every day, I think that this whole thing, what we're just talking about, pajamas and bonnets and do-rags. Family, this is not right. This is not a dress code, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get into it just a little bit. Dress code discussions are likely to intensify in Tuskegee, in HBCU, after Tuskegee University announced new campus expectations covering students' attire, classroom attendance, and cell phone use. Tuskegee President Dr. Mark A. Brown outlined the changes in a message addressed to parents of incoming students. Brown said the private HBCU is entering what he described as a period of transformation and renewal while expecting its largest new student enrollment in 32 years. This is Booker T. Washington School, ladies and gentlemen. If you don't know who Booker T is, you might want to go and look him up. It's a lot of HBCUs you should go to. But I think this can be and should be instituted in all HBCUs.
I really don't think we need to say anything else after that. And I do want to say, yes, Mrs. Pearlie, I agree. This is the time. Okay? This is the time. All right? And there's a lot of critics responding that preparation can easily become cultural correction when Black coded practices are singled out. And I really beg to differ. I really think this has nothing to do with the removal of Black culture or cultural correction, but what it is professional correction. You know, when I was a young man, so anybody that's in my age group watching or listening, tell me if I'm wrong, particularly if you're from the Northeast, and you remember this, Mrs. Pearlie, like it was just, I was told all the time, particularly in high school, boy, pull your pants up. Pull your pants up. What's wrong with you?
Act like you got some sense.
Right. Tie your shoes. What's wrong with you? And, you know, I could see, you know, as a performer, and I'll be honest with you, to this day, I wear shell-toe Adidas with fat laces. Okay? But I also wear bow ties. I don't wear my pants on my, you know, I wear them on my waist. Essentially, I wear jean shorts, but I also wear suits, 2-piece, 3-piece, and suspenders with sweaters.
You know what I find funny?
Please tell me.
Is that when young folk go to the club, you don't see them in pajamas and bonnets and maybe a do-rag or two.
What's your do-rag or two?
But they get dressed up in their finest clothes and looking
Yeah.
cute, smelling good,
Yeah.
looking good and everything. They go all out going to the club and partying, right?
1000%.
You don't see them in pajamas.
You
There's
know,
no argument there.
no, you know, and that's the idea of priorities in the wrong place. And when I say in the wrong place, well, yeah, because and when I say in the wrong place, you do want to look good, right? You do want the ladies to like you, want the dudes to like you, want to smell nice, you want to get a phone number, whatever it is you're trying to get. But to Mrs. Pearlie's point, you don't want to get a job, or you don't want to start a business, or you don't need a business loan, or you don't want to be the director of a department. You don't want to, do you understand what I'm saying? All right. Oh, I do have to give this disclaimer. By no means is this a bash Trump thing. And we're not talking politics in that space. We are speaking about administration or administrative debacles, if you will. But we because I want to be very clear when I'm playing certain things. These folk, you can go to the next slide. They have their way. Well, they're barking on the president, which is their right. But that's not what I don't care about that. We're talking down here because we've already experienced faulty treaties. We've experienced so many things. Right now, let's try to work down here. And when I say work down here, and I'm gonna say this real quick and keep it moving, I've heard for years when folk is telling communities if they really want to have control and power of their community, financial and policy and legislative control, they need to be dealing local. Right? So if we're not talking about that, we don't need to have a conversation about that. Now, the Smithsonian is a national memory system. And I explained to you one of the things, or one of the ways they went about creating this memory system. And the Smithsonian as a whole is not one museum. It is a large federal trust institution containing museums, plural, research centers, plural, archives, plural, collections, plural, educational programs, plural, and cultural resources, plural. Excuse me. Its work reaches history, art, science, technology, music, folk culture, and Black, Indigenous American life. Now, the way it's presented, they separate African American life with Native American life. We don't have to go into that right now. We just know that they have African American Museum and a Native American Museum, okay? So the July congressional hearing focused heavily on the National Museum of American History. That museum is distinct from the National Museum of African American History and Culture. However, political pressure directed at the Smithsonian can affect the entire institution's culture, budgets, exhibition practices, research priorities, and willingness to address different subjects. I like to call them sensitive. They even went as far as questioning the professionalism and capability of the director, if I'm not mistaken, right? The National Museum of American History holds more than famous patriotic objects. Matter of fact, could you look that up to make sure if they were questioning the director's not ethics, but if they could do the job, if they were capable of doing the job, okay? The director of the museum.
Well, what's the question? What do you mean?
I believe one of the things that the administration did, and those that were, I guess, leading the assault on the museum, the director was being challenged and questioned as if, I believe it's a woman, she did not have the capacity to run this thing correctly.
I'm not clear.
I'm asking you to check to see if that was the case, if they were saying that, because I believe they were, but I don't want to I don't want to spew propaganda. I believe that's what was said, and I'm asking you to check to make sure. Okay. So its responsibility includes the social, political, technological, and cultural development of the United States, which means its work necessarily includes conflict. So what is that conflict? Slavery and emancipation, labor and capital, immigration and exclusion, war and protest, citizenship and what? Disenfranchisement. So now the National Museum of African American History and Culture has a specific mission to present the contributions, struggles, and achievements that shaped the nation, right? The broader Smithsonian also holds indigenous collections and has responsibilities connected to consultation, repatriation, and representation of indigenous nations. Therefore, a campaign to make Smithsonian history more politically acceptable. Wait, what did Gabriel say? Thank you for that, brother. Therefore, a campaign to make Smithsonian history more politically acceptable has consequences beyond a single exhibition label. Do y'all understand what I'm saying? Next slide. I am going through this and speaking about both of them, but not. It's really not. This is really not a comparative thing between the two, but it's a layout to show you what is happening and how it's affecting how it's affecting America and the community. Okay, so again, to explain both sides fairly, I want to begin with a little review. Okay. President Trump's March 2025 executive order argued that federal cultural institutions had adopted a divisive ideology that portrayed American values and institutions as inherently oppressive. Is that right? The order called for a return to what the administration described as accurate, uplifting, and unifying history. Do y'all remember what? Look at the chat and read what romantic nationalism means. Go ahead, put it up there. Yeah, I know it is, but they need to know. Okay? So supporters of the congressional hearing argued that the National Museum of American History had become politically, how can I word this? What's a good way to word this? Maybe politically. What's a good way to word this? Hmm. 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 Okay. Politically biased. It took me a second. Sometimes I got to think a little hard. You can take it down now. Thank you. So ultimately, they're saying that the National Museum of American History have become politically biased. Okay, that they objected to exhibitions and interpretations that, in their view, emphasize race, gender, oppression, and national failure at the expense of liberty, democracy, opportunity, invention, sacrifice, and shared citizenship. Okay. From this perspective, a national, and this word keeps coming up, museum is not only a space of critical inquiry, it is also a civic institution expected to build public attachment to the nation. Supporters believe that visitors, especially young visitors, should leave understanding the country's achievements and the continuing value of its founding ideals, even if it was on the backs of the people, or even if it had to do with broken treaties, right? That concern should not be dismissed as though national achievement has no place in a museum. See, the legitimate question inside their argument is whether a museum can present historical injustice without reducing the nation to injustice alone. The cultural news task is to distinguish that legitimate curatorial question from political control over scholarship. Meaning, what is a legitimate curation of the story? Okay. Next slide, please. You went to the next slide? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So critics are not objecting to the inclusion of patriotism, democratic ideals, military history, innovation, or national accomplishment. The objection is that the executive branch and Congress are using political authority to determine the acceptable tone and conclusions of historical scholarship, romantic nationalism. Right? Museums always interpret. That's what they do. What do I mean by interpret? See, so this goes back to definitions and defining. What do we mean by interpret? So you have a story, you have a narrative, you have a collection, right? So what do we mean by collection? Let's say there's memorabilia from the Civil War, right? Guns, swords, watches, attire, diaries. So now you got to tell a story, a historic story of these items, how it fits into the broader aspect of American history, what's its relevance, right? So you have to interpret those items so that you could tell a cohesive story. That's what we mean by interpret. And if I'm wrong, whoever's listening, let me know.
Because you don't have an accurate count.
Well, yes. Well, yes. Accurate
In
meaning
some
we
cases.
accurate meaning we wasn't there.
Right.
This is based on memory, right? But also it's always interpretation when you are taking items and telling a story around the items. It's always going to be interpretation, right? So they select objects, write labels, organize chronologically, choose whose testimony appears. Now we're getting a little deeper. Choose whose testimony appears, and decide what context visitors need. Now that's a little deeper. All right? But do you understand that context? So now, in putting this together, we're not just interpreting in order to tell a story, we are choosing whose testimony is representing the whole. What American, what colonizer, what colony, right? What do we want visitors to walk away believing? This is what the interpretation does. Okay? So we have these items. We understand. Well, we have an understanding of what they are, right? We still have to do extensive research on the items. And that could come in different forms, meaning you can have information on it. You may have to, just to give an example, you may have to do research on what was going on during the time of this. So I don't know. You can have a handwritten diary or handwritten paper, something like this, and you have to go back and look at what was the materials used to write on and write with, so you can guesstimate when this was written and what was going on in society at that time. You know, all these things are relevant, right? And in doing that, now it's like, okay, whose story are we telling? what do we want our audience, because ultimately your visitors or your audience, what do we want them to walk away with? Do we want to walk away with them reading how this enslaver, or better yet, this person that we celebrate did a lot of underhanded businesses that removed people from their land in order for other people can come and live on it? Do we want to tell that story, or do we want to look at it and say, okay, he's discussed it, bless you. This piece of the story shares how this person, what's the word? Took opportunity and went and did something great for this group of people. Okay, so let's leave this part of the story out. Do you see what I'm saying? So now, with that being said, there is no exhibition without interpretation. The safeguard is professional research, peer review, transparency, multiple perspectives, and accountability to the communities represented, not a demand that history produces a predetermined patriotic feeling, okay? So a directive to make history more uplifting can operate as a form of censorship, is ultimately what I'm saying, and ultimately what's being said, even when no official orders staff to remove the word slavery. Curators may avoid difficult subjects, reduce context, replace direct language with vague language, or present violence and dispossession as unfortunate exceptions rather than the actual system perpetuated on a group of people that the land belonged to. This is why this situation should be described as an attack on culture, tradition, and history. Black indigenous histories become vulnerable when their documented experiences are treated as obstacles to national unity. The demand for comfort can become more important than the evidence. Before we go to the next, do you have something to read for the good folks?
I sure do. I always do. When public institutions debate whether Black history is too political, the need for independent Black cultural interpretation becomes even clearer. The African American Folklores is a print, digital, and multimedia platform created so Black communities can document, define, interpret, and preserve their cultural practices on their own terms. That's what we was just talking about, right?
Yep.
It provides space for academics, community scholars, artists, activists, students, elders, independent researchers, and tradition bearers to produce knowledge together. The platform publishes essays, interviews, field reports, archival reflections, oral histories, multimedia work, and community-centered scholarship on Black folklore, music, traditional arts, memory, belief, language, and everyday cultural expression. Its purpose is to simply to increase representation. I'll read that again. Its purpose is to increase representation. Its purpose is to strengthen Black cultural authority and narrative ownership. Membership sustains independent publication, workshops, educational materials, archival initiatives, and opportunities for emerging and established cultural workers. The membership community includes emerging folklorists, root members, cultural keepers, seed keepers, and the elder circle, each designed for a different level of participation, contribute, contribution, and long-term support. Explore membership and publication opportunities at the Jack Dapper Blues Radio.tv.
That's right. That's right. That deserves an applause. What's wrong with you? I'm queuing up. I'm sorry, Mrs. Pearlie. I was queuing up. Now, listen, y'all. Sunday nights, you ride with us, and we give you curated information that we do deep dive research on for free. Okay? So that means you can assist in our efforts through either Patreon, through either Substack, or through just donations. Okay? The work is extensive. The work is extensive. And we're asking for your help so we can continue doing the work. Simple as that. It's as simple as that.
If you find value in what it is that we're doing, and that's the whole point of this conversation, the value in all of this information.
Yeah,
please
donate, support it, baby, support it. Stop playing. Now, I want to play something before I go into. Go to the next slide. But before I start discussing this, but before I start discussing it, I want to share something with y'all. Okay. Remember to donate. Okay, this is serious business.
Like, share, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Substack.
Black people across this country are outraged at what is happening now with these efforts to do away with the African American Museum and all of the Smithsonian.
I don't know if y'all heard it from the beginning. Sorry.
Black people across this country are outraged at what is happening now with these efforts to do away with the African American Museum and all of the Smithsonian. They're outraged because they've lived too many years, been through too many struggles, suffered too many bruises, and clearly have very, very, very little to show for that sojourn here in this country. I want to be real clear about this. If you erase it, we will replace it. It's that damn simple. We don't seem to learn. If anything, we should be looking at history to learn and to make sure that we are taking advantage of what we've learned. You know, it was Abraham Lincoln in 1848 who addressed his countrymen in Edwardsville, Illinois, and he said, and I quote, "When you have succeeded in dehumanizing the Negro, when you have put him down and made it but for him to be, but as the beast of the field, when you have extinguished his soul in this world and placed him where the ray of hope is blown out, as in the darkness of the damned, are you quite sure," he asked, "that the demon you have roused will not one day turn and rend you?" He said, "What constitutes the bulwark of our freedom and our independence? It is not," said Lincoln, "our crown and battlements. It is not our armies and our navies. It is not our bristling seacoast. All those things are not our reliance against tyranny, because they can all be turned against us without having made us weaker for the struggle."
So, that line he read, making folk the beast of the field, is during that 100-year war of the 1800s when they were turning indigenous into Negroes, which who they were, but the Indian Removal Act, if you will. And for those who didn't want to reclassify, for those who didn't want to become, I guess, go with the program, they were to be turned into the beasts of the field. This is documented. And I'll also say that his language reminds me of a song that I wrote and performed, and you can find it on my album, The African American Folklore and the Blues, called The Prayer Indigenous Blues. Check it out. Now, I wanted to play that because what his testimony was demonstrating was oral history operating inside a formal political hearing, right? He did not just cite books or policy. He described growing up under segregation, encountering a colored water fountain, and seeing the occupational limits imposed on his parents. Now, that mind you, I didn't play the entire thing. You have to go see the entire thing. Okay, if you're like, wait a minute. You got to go see the entire thing. Okay, oral history is not simply somebody remembering the past without standards. Responsible oral history records a person's account, preserves voice and perspective, compares testimony with other evidence, and recognizes that lived experience reveals dimensions of history that official records may conceal. Now, if you know Jack Dapper Blues Heritage Preservation Foundation's mission, you know it falls right in line to that. Segregation could be described through statutes and court cases. Okay? The testimony we just heard adds the bodily and familial experience of segregation. Okay? Black communities have repeatedly replaced missing official records with church histories, family Bibles, funeral programs, cemetery knowledge, photographs, newspapers, recorded interviews, folklore, and music. Okay? Next slide, please. So now the phrase American history is sometimes used as though Black indigenous history are special interest editions. And that is historically inaccurate. Okay? Yeah. The United States developed through indigenous land, settler expansion. What? What happened? Okay. It's okay, but this is a serious situation right here because I'm explaining that the United States was developed through indigenous land, settlers expansion, treaty making, and treaty violation, indigenous removal, well, the Indian Removal Act, okay? Black agricultural and industrial labor, territorial conquest, migration, and the creation of racial classification that today still have an effect. These are not side stories. These are part of the structure of the nation. And we love the nation, and you can love something and it don't act right and you want it to change its ways. Black indigenous histories intersect all over the place in American history. Okay? Family, slaveholding, maroonage, which is maroon communities, tribal freedmen, racial reclassification, shared southern spaces, military service, removal routes, land allotments, and cultural exchange. Now, I say this as in letting you know that Black American, Indigenous American, and then what we consider Black as in the color that are not American. Because a lot of people like to say Black and African is synonymous, meaning you're only Black people come from Africa. Now they're also saying everyone comes from Africa. But when it comes to Black, and mind you, this is not a disrespect to Africa. As I read to you in the books that I share, Africans were coming to the Americas and explaining to Columbus and the kings and queens of that region over there, the Black folk they were encountering here. Okay? Stop trying to act like it's two different people. And stop trying to act like the idea of the freedmen are just African slaves of Indians. Stop letting other people tell your story. And this is why it is essential to understand what is going on with the museum, the Smithsonian, and these policies to tell a romantic nationalized story or give a romantic nationalized image. Something that's been happening for years that I'm putting a name to it. Now, I didn't create the name. The name's already been there. But for those of you rocking with me, I'm sharing with you what the name is. Okay? And the reason why, and I have this broken down like this. So many of you have been misinformed, brainwashed, and indoctrinated that you don't even understand that the colors, how can I put this? Black folk been here, period. And the black folk that were here, some of them were African, but most of them were not. They were Indian, period. Okay? And when I say here, America, South America, Mexico, Hawaii. Okay? Next slide. I don't know. I don't even want to waste too much time on that. So now, folklore is often misunderstood as old stories that may or may not be true. In our field, folklore refers to traditional expressive culture transmitted through families, communities, occupations, faith groups, regions, and social networks. It includes narratives, legends, sayings, rituals, foodways, dress, belief, celebration, occupational knowledge, memorable practices, memorial practices, and the ways communities explain their worlds. And the way, how can I say, engagement, agreed upon engagement, right? Folklore reveals what people value, fear, remember, contest, and pass forward. Official archives frequently preserve the perspective of governments, property owners, employers, courts, schools, and large institutions. Remember what I said earlier. The two versions of oral histories, those from the people and those from the establishments, right? So folklore and oral history help document the perspective of the people who were recorded only as labor, property, defendants, census categories, or problems to be managed. When national history is narrowed, folklore becomes even more important. Now, remember what Mrs. Pearlie said earlier. Now is the time to document your people. Take our course beyond the romance of the field to start. Also, ethnography 101, right? However, folklore should not be romanticized. No pun intended. You could have put a laugh there. That's where the laugh track goes, young lady. You okay? Here you go. So it should not be romanticized as a substitute for funded museums and professional archives. However, let me be very clear with you in what I'm saying. People take that and run with it. It should be part of funded museums and professional archives. Let's be very clear. It should be part. Dr. Diana Njai has such a great article that she wrote about utilizing the space of the museum for not just public programming, but public practicing in a way that repatriates the space to the people as they utilize the space, not just for documentation, but healing, okay? And education, public practice. And there's others. There's a museum in Mexico, if I'm not mistaken, or it's either Texas, New Mexico, or Mexico, that the people, the community activists, advocates, and scholars were brought in to actually create the installations. You know, there was some issues and hiccups, but they were straightened out. Maybe I'll find the article and share it. Okay, so communities should not be forced to preserve anything alone, while public institutions retreat from their responsibility, and that's what I mean. Okay, next slide, please. You okay? Thank you. Ethnomusicology, baby. You didn't think I was going to bring that up? Ah. Ethnomusicology. Go ahead. Thank you. Ethnomusicology studies music as human and social practice, as well as experiential. Okay, so it asks who makes music, where is it performed, what communities believe it means, how it circulates, and how power affects its production and reception. It's experiential, right? The blues cannot be responsibly interpreted as only a scale, chord pattern, or entertainment genre. It carries histories of land and labor, migration, racial violence, incarceration, family separation, religion, humor, sexuality, community gathering, and economic survival. Just like hip hop, baby. And again, the same is also true for the spirituals, work songs, gospel, jazz, okay, protest music, and other community-based forms. And let me just remind y'all, if you want to know indigenous history of the American South, listen to the blues. And I use the term indigenous history intentionally. Okay? The blues is, those who've been rocking with me for years know I've been utilizing this term for years. The blues is the oral, O-R-A-L, and the oral, A-U-R-A-L, right? Story of the tribe of the Americas. Okay? It started here. Okay? And that is one reason attacks on historical interpretation are also attacks on our musical tradition, because they allow the nation to consume Black indigenous sound and sonics while refusing the conditions, knowledge systems, and communities that gave the sound meaning. Next slide. Now we're going to get into Tuskegee. I really want to get into Booker T, but let's talk Tuskegee a bit first, okay? Tuskegee University was founded in 1881 in the aftermath of slavery and Reconstruction. Under Booker T. Washington, a fierce scholar, it became associated with industrial education, economic self-reliance, discipline, institution building, and a strategy of racial advancement within a violently segregated society. Okay? That history produced real achievements. And when I say real, I mean tangible and intangible achievements: education, agricultural extension, teacher training, scientific work, business development, and Black institutional autonomy. It also produced continuing debate about accommodation, racial uplift, class hierarchy, gender expectations, and the pressure to prove Black worthiness to white America. That's where that last line, the pressure to prove Black worthiness to white America, is where I believe a lot of Black scholars have a problem with this new dress expectation, because we're in a day we don't have to prove worthiness to white America or non-Black
But it's not
America.
even about that. Just don't
That-
wear your pajamas and do rags to class.
No, but I agree with you. I 1000% agree with you. But what I'm saying is, I believe that last line is what people interpret this mandate to be. I'm not disputing what you're saying. I agree fully. Okay. Dress and conduct were historically part of many HBCU cultures, and guess what? Part of a lot of entertainment cultures. I remember talking to my brother Marquise Knox, and we were like, "Why are these dudes going up there playing the blues and wife beaters and stuff?" And I'm not calling nobody out, because some people do that. And depending on where you are, I understand what we both understand, depending on where you are. But what we were saying was, when you're doing like a show, a full-fledged show, not an impromptu, or not somewhere where that attire is warranted, why are you not dressed up? This is your business. You know what I mean?
If you're on the back porch, then
That's what I'm saying. Right, exactly. So formal presentation could express pride, seriousness, collective aspiration, religious values, and readiness for leadership. Alumni who supported Tuskegee's policy may sincerely understand it as restoring or reaffirming an institutional tradition rather than importing something new. However, tradition is not automatically beyond criticism. Some ask, who created the tradition? Under what historical pressures? Whose behavior is regulated, or whose behavior is regulated, and whether its original purpose still serves students today. A tradition formed as a survival response to white scrutiny may not preserve dignity, but reproduce that scrutiny, or do both at the same time. But I tend to agree with my wife. Don't wear pajamas to a professional setting. Let me share something with y'all.
Girls would come to school with rollers in their hair. Okay. When I was in high school, girls would show up with rollers in their hair. Now, I didn't do it, and I ain't judging nobody else. I'm just telling y'all what the people did. But that's not what this video is about. This video is about the new regulations that Tuskegee University just handed down. If you don't know, Tuskegee University just said 2026 school year, no bonnets. And as a matter of fact, if you go into a business meeting, you need to have a business suit on. Now, I might be considered an old head, but I want to know what you think. But I also want to know what you think about these pajamas, because we didn't all seen it in recent years. You see kids walking around in sometimes it's adults. Sometimes it's grown people with 401ks that's out here at Target, the restaurant, the malls with their pajamas on. Now, I have my opinion, but I want to know yours. Are we just out of touch? Do we need to get with the times? Or are we sounding like our parents used to sound when they would be like, back in my day, back in my... Are we just out of touch? Or do we need to roll it back on the pajamas, the bonnets, all out in public? I need to know, because I want to be up on what's going on.
All right, please, next next slide. And ironically, when I did a short video during the week about this, that was my question. Am I just being, as my youngsters would say, an old fart about it, right? I remember Monique, the comedian actress or actor, and she's a great actor, talking about sisters wearing bonnets in public places and stuff like this. So to give some context to what's going on, the university's stated position is that the rules are designed to prepare students for professional life, not prevent them from employing or enjoying the Tuskegee experience. Reports describe expectations that students arrive with appropriate business clothing available and restrictions on revealing clothing, bedroom shoes, bonnets, and do-rags in classrooms, the cafeteria, and official settings. Now, this goes back to, matter of fact, I'll share this, then I'll go back to what I was talking about, what that brother spoke. Supporters argue that colleges have the authority to establish conduct standards and that students benefit from learning how expectations change across settings. A person may dress differently for dormitory, classroom, laboratory, job interview, religious service, performance, or formal ceremony. Now, I spoke earlier about this very a brilliant brother who is a scholar, and his concern was that something like this would give students more interaction with law enforcement who are enforcing this law. But I mean, to be honest, if you just come to class professional, you would not have any run-ins. Or at least, let me rephrase that. You should not. You should not. I hope you do not. I hope you do not. I do not want to talk like I'm out of touch, because I'm not. You can get harassed in the suit like you can get harassed in the do-rag and hoodie. Let's be clear. Okay? However, I think it's less about anything other than just setting the tone early, so by the time you finish your education, whether it's undergrad or graduate higher education, you're ready. You're ready. Okay? Some alumni say that formal presentation has long been part of Tuskegee culture, and that the announcement is being interpreted outside its institutional context. I didn't go there, but what I know of Booker T. Washington and the establishment of Tuskegee and the Rosenwald schools, I would have to believe that this has always been something that was part of it, okay? They view professional dress as a practical skill, a sign of respect for the learning environment, and a constitution or continuation, of HBCU traditions of excellence. Those arguments deserve to be heard. I believe so. It is reasonable for a university to teach situational awareness, workplace expectations, and the politics of appearance. And I have to say something, honestly. Let's say none of these schools enforce this, ask this. And then these kids, these youngsters, or these non-traditional students go out in the world and they can't land no position or start no business or anything. The first thing they're going to do is say this institution did not prepare me. The first thing they're going to say is, why didn't they tell me? Why didn't they say I need to dress like this? So, I mean, come on. Next slide, please. That's all right. I want to share something real quick. Because this is something, this is, as they say, big time. Big time. Let's hear what this brother got to say real quick. Okay.
They have decided to ban bonnets, do-rags, pajamas, and other casual attire on campus. You can imagine, though, social media is divided about this. Some people believe that HBCU has every right to set high standards to teach students how to be in the workplace and how to represent themselves professionally. Hey, what's going on? Welcome to the Sam Go podcast. My name is Sam Go. If you're new here or the algorithm has brought you to my channel, go ahead and subscribe to your notifications.
We're not doing that.
I got my bachelor's, got my master's, all from PWIs, right? Primarily or predominantly white institutions. I spent a lot of time, though, at FAMU. I enjoyed FAMU culture. As a music person, I love they band. I love it. So I love FAMU, and I'm now in Atlanta. So I do love me some. Hey, I don't know if y'all have seen this, but Tuskegee University is in the headlines for something I don't think they should be in the headlines for. I don't think this is a big deal. They're basically saying you can't be ratchet and ghetto no more. So I don't know what's going on with this. Tuskegee University, President Dr. Mark Brown says the goal isn't to shame students, but it is to create a culture of professionalism and prepare graduates for the workplace. So they have decided to ban bonnets, do-rags, pajamas, and other casual attire on campus. You can imagine, though, social media is divided about this. Some people believe that HBCU has every right to set high standards to teach students how to be in the workplace and how to represent themselves professionally. Hey, what's going on? Welcome to the Sam Go.
So, good folk, pardon me, because I was want to make sure I got y'all the point I wanted y'all to hear. Okay. Next slide. Wait, did you do the next slide for me already? Yeah, go. No. Go back up real quick. I'm sorry. The cultural critique of yes. Sorry about that. I jumped the gun. All right. I see. Critics describe the policy as respectability politics. That term refers to strategies through which marginalized people are encouraged to demonstrate moral worth, discipline, refinement, and conformity in hopes of reducing prejudice or gaining access. In other words, assimilation, which is ridiculous. Well, no, it's not, but it is. A little double talk there. Respectability strategies have sometimes helped individuals navigate dangerous systems. They have also shifted responsibility away from discriminatory institutions and onto Black people, suggesting that racism can be overcome through proper dress, speech, hair, sexuality, family structure, or behavior. But I have to say that's total bullshit. Don't wear your pajamas in a professional setting, is all they're saying. You know what? Even when you work from home, if you work from when you work from home, Lord Jesus, and you're consulting someone, you're a content creator, and I mean, I don't know how I can. What am I supposed to think when you now? I was gonna say when you just look like you rolled over in bed and got up and made a video. Some people, they got makeup on with their pajamas, all this other stuff. If your business is selling bedroom attire and materials, okay. But if you're consulting me on something and we got to have a Zoom, please put on some proper attire. Be professional. Okay? Now, a cultural analysis does not require declaring that every garment is appropriate in every setting. Okay? It asks whether the university has explained the setting-based rationale, consulted students, distinguished health and hair care practices from disrespect, addressed religious and medical accommodations, and ensured that enforcement will not become gendered, classed, or arbitrary, which is very, I think that is feasible, right? The specific mention of bonnets and do-rags also matter because these are not culturally neutral objects, okay? However, even back in the day, we can go before the 80s with conchs. These scarves wasn't worn in professional settings. Now, for entertainers, they may have worn it during rehearsal. For beauticians, but we're also still talking about places that warrant the wearing. Next slide, please. So, folklorists study dress as material culture and expressive behavior. Clothing communicates region, occupation, age, gender, religion, class, affiliation, resistance, right? Think about the Black Panthers attire, right? Celebration, mourning, and ideas about the body. The meaning of an item changes across settings. A head covering may be protective, religious, ceremonial, fashionable, practical, stigmatized, or all of these depending on who wears it, where they wear it, and who is interpreting it, right or wrong. Institutions also communicate through dress code. A dress code tells us what an institution imagines a proper student, worker, citizen, man, or woman should look like. Therefore, the policy itself is a cultural document worthy of analysis. Now, let me wait, first, before I even go into that, the question for Tuskegee are not only whether a rule exists, but what cultural assumption the rule carries. Which bodies are considered distracting? Which forms of blackness are associated with disorder? Whose professional standards are being taught? Are students learning strategic code switching, or are they being told that acceptance requires distance from their communities? Or how about, hey, don't wear your PJs to a professional setting? Don't wear what,
Rules maintain order.
Rules maintain order.
And if you don't want to go to a school that have that order in place, then go to a school who have lax rules and regulations and where you can go do that. It's really that simple too.
Well, how about this? Next slide, please. How about this? When you dress and look lax, your behavior is lax. So on my feed on YouTube, and if you have not subscribed, please subscribe, share, like, engage. Someone wrote that their child went to Howard School of Business, and it was a requirement for them to dress professional. And this is always, and it was something that worked and helped. Now, going back to the Smithsonian, that story concerns approved history. It asks which account of the United States are considered balanced, patriotic, or divisive, right? The Tuskegee story concerns approved Black presentation. It asks which forms of dress are considered disciplined, professional, or inappropriate inside a Black educational institution. One situation is driven by federal political power. The other arises from internal Black institutional government or governance, right? The source of authority are different and the stakes are different to a degree. And I say to a degree because they both affect the same people, essentially. And I'd also believe that the Smithsonian affects everyone. Okay, not that the bonnets does it, you know, and the do-rags don't, but that, you know. I do also believe we should not claim that Tuskegee's dress code and or expectations is equivalent to a federal campaign over a museum. But I will not disregard the idea that professionalism in the Black community could help implement, right? So, if matter of fact, I'll put it, here's a better way of putting it. I think I squandered that example. Let me say it like this. The Black folk that are at this hearing discussing the disparaging policies that they're trying to enforce on the museums, these are professional people, dressed professional, sometimes may talk a little crazy, but they look professional, they sound professional, they know where they are. None of them went into this hearing or sit on Congress in pajamas, do-rags, or bonnets. And mind you, my mama, my aunties, my wife, Mrs. Pearlie, my daughters wear bonnets in the house. Me, my brothers, cousins, uncles wore do-rags. Now, I wore them outside as a younger person, but I knew when and where. I didn't wear a do-rag to class. I didn't wear it to work. I was in the barber, so I didn't need to.
You know, I remember my grandmother, a Southern woman, wore a house dress and a house coat. But when it was time, a house dress and a house coat, but when it was time for her to go outside, she put a wig on, put a little lipstick on, put a dress on, her shoes on, maybe stockings they wore back in the day like that. Whether she was going shopping, cashing a check, going to a friend's house.
Right.
You never saw them in the house coat. Now, if they were in the building borrowing a cup of sugar, that's one thing. But to go outside the building, you didn't see them in house coats.
No.
Rollers, any of that.
No.
That's stuff that you wore in the house to prepare yourself so you could look presentable to the world. So you can maintain a job.
Yeah, you're professional, yeah.
So the job can see that you're responsible. It's also a part of self-care.
And then you know what else is a part of self-care? It's a part of mental health. But if you want to talk about back in the days like that, folk used to dress to the nine just to walk up and down the street.
They used to call us proud people. We were proud people.
Yes. Let me share something with y'all. Gosh darn. We get into the nitty-gritty here.
White pride rally disguised as a congressional hearing. It might be uncomfortable for some people on this committee to hear about the true history of America. And I hate that for them, but facts are facts. And it's a fact that there is a violent, exclusionary, discriminatory, sexist, and racist part of American history, where our indigenous populations were forcibly displaced from their land, where thousands of Black people were unjustly lynched, where Black people were denied the right to vote, and they still trying to do it today, where women needed their husband's permission to open a bank account, where people with disabilities were routinely excluded from schools, workplaces, and public life, where 4 little Black girls were murdered by the KKK at the 16th Street Baptist Church. And a lot of this wasn't that long ago. In fact, 3 of those little girls would be 77 and 1 would be 74. More than 40 members of Congress serving right now would be older than them. Ruby Bridges, who was the first Black child to desegregate an all-white school, is only 71 years old. More than 100 members of Congress serving right now are older than her. So attacks on the Smithsonian or any other institution that's willing to tell the true history of America is not only an attempt to rewrite history, it's an attempt to erase history. So Dr. Blight, if Republicans are going to ban books, penalize schools and universities, attack museums, if states continue to change curriculum, where do Americans go to learn about the complicated, sometimes racist and violent parts of American history?
Thank you for the question. I think they will have to keep going to the same institutions, and we have to keep fighting to preserve what we are doing in those institutions. They have to keep going to public schools. They have to keep going to the public libraries. They have to keep going to the great Smithsonian. Look, the purpose of history is to enlighten us, inspire us, trouble us, bother us, sometimes make us angry. I find it hard to believe that a young person could go through the Museum of American History and not come out at least inspired with the single most important thing, a sense of the past, a sense of history. Americans have to keep going to those places they trust. We have to keep those institutions trustworthy.
We have to keep those institutions trustworthy. Guy, I saw what you said, Guy. 1,000,000,000%. We have to keep, and speaking of keeping it trustworthy, speaking of being responsible stewards, this is a perfect time to sign up for my course, Beyond the Romance of the Field, so you can learn how to be a responsible steward as we remain trustworthy with our narrative. Now, next slide. Huh?
Yeah, I'll read it real quick. The ad for that. The ad.
Go ahead.
The issues discussed tonight require more than opinion. They require ethical training in documentation, interpretation, consent, cultural context, and community responsibility. Jack Dapper Blues offer courses and workshops for students, educators, artists, researchers, museums, libraries, cultural organizations, and community members who want to document Black cultural traditions responsibly. These programs connect public folklore, applied ethnomusicology, Black studies, oral history, and archival practice, and community stewardship, like what my husband just said here. Current programs includes blues people, music, and folklore, applied blues, songwriting, fieldwork, and community documentation, 12-bar blues and A, Black stories, ownership, definition, protection, and care, Beyond the Romance. These are different courses, I'm sorry. Beyond the Romance, and Black Junk Archiving. Together, these courses teach participants how to understand the blues as cultural history, conduct ethical fieldwork, organize family and community archives, and protect the ownership and context of Black stories. Programs are available in certified, non-certified, self-paced, and workshop formats. Custom training is also available for schools, universities, museums, libraries, cultural centers, nonprofits, and community organizations. Sponsorship, underwriting, and institutional partnership opportunities are available. View courses, workshops, and booking information at lamontjackpearly.com.
And the African American folklore.
And the African American folklore. We're not talking about it, we're being about it. We're doing the work.
That's right. Sorry, bud. You can put that up, young man.
This workbook, oh, put the workbook back up. The workbook should be,
The well.
yeah, it should be in everyone's household.
So,
Especially during the summertime, you can have discussion.
yes, the well is very unique, and it is specific to our ecosystem. It is definitely part of Beyond the Romance of the Field. However, it is even essentially part of the entire ecosystem of the African American folklore and Jack Dapper Blues, where it teaches you how to use our platforms. It also teaches you what we're discussing, how to identify, how to begin to formulate these questions, right? And different things. If you want to know more, because I can only but tell you but so much here, again, either take the course or we can do consultations, one-on-ones, or in group sessions, workshops on my Patreon. Okay? Go ahead, bud. Bring that next one up.
Great for family reunions. How about that?
That too, yes. Now, I just want to say the useful connection in both these situations reveal how institutions establish cultural boundaries. And do you know why that's important? What we've been talking about. Sundown towns and other boundaries for Black Indigenous people, okay? So they decide what may be displayed, what may be said, and what we spoke about this last 2 weeks, sundown towns. I just wanted to be clear, that's not what we're talking about tonight. But when we discuss boundaries, these things coincide.
You can go to our YouTube page.
To see those, right, the last couple of weeks, that's right. Okay, so they decide what may be displayed, what may be said, what may be worn, and what image the public should receive. Our cultural news responsibility is to examine who participated in those decisions, what history shaped them, and who bears the consequences. Okay, now with that being said, national museums should include American achievement, democratic ideals, innovation, courage, and collective accomplishments. They should also retain professional independence to present slavery, indigenous dispossession, segregation, labor exploitation, racial violence, and the resistance with full context. National pride cannot require historical deletion, or essentially, what do I have to name it what it is if it's doing that? Tuskegee University may teach professional preparation, situational dress, institutional pride, and workplace strategy. It should do so through transparent standards, student consultation, cultural competence, reasonable accommodations, and an educational process. And it doesn't humiliate students, to my understanding, nor give arbitrary punishment. I'll go as far as saying, if you know who Booker T. Washington is, this really should not be a conversation. Now, if you want to say, well, that was 1881, well, I mean, you know something? In 2026, if we're looking at a job market, if we're looking at an entrepreneurial market, professionalism is still a thing, right? Mm-hmm. Black Indigenous communities should not have to choose between recognition and truth, or between opportunity and cultural dignity. Institutions should prepare people to navigate power while also equipping them to question and transform the standards power imposes. What does Brother Guy say, excuse me? Ending slavery wasn't the reason for the Civil War. Exactly. Next slide, please. So now, what should a national museum owe the government, professional historians, taxpayers, and the communities whose histories it holds? Okay, I think I want to ask a series of questions. Now, I'm going to put these questions for my production team to put them in, but I don't want y'all to put them in all at once. I want to put them in one by one so the people can see, okay? And I'm going to read them off, okay? I want y'all to think about this, okay? As I read them off. Indeed, indeed. Okay. I'm going to read it off again, okay? Yes, thank you, guys, definitely. What should a national museum owe the government, professional historians, taxpayers, and the communities whose histories it holds? Next question. Can a museum emphasize national achievement without softening slavery, Black indigenous dispossession, segregation, and racial violence? Who decides dispossession? I didn't think I said that right, sorry. Who decides whether an exhibition or exhibition is balanced? Do you understand what that means? Who decides this? Okay. When does an HBCU dress standard express Black institutional tradition, and when does it reproduce standards developed under white scrutiny? Now, that question is kind of a loaded question, right? Because we're still under a particular scrutiny, all right? Should students be taught how to code switch and dress strategically? How can that be taught without presenting Black cultural practices as inferior? Now, I asked that to be somewhat neutral, but I have to say, don't believe for 1 minute that Black institutions don't expect professionalism. If you think a Black business will allow you to work in pajamas, bonnets, and do-rags, and their business does not call for that sort of attire, come on, man. All right? Lastly, what oral history, songs, family records, and community traditions would be endangered if public institutions stop preserving difficult history? Okay? We almost finished, y'all. We almost finished. Next slide. That's right, Guy. I see you, Guy. I appreciate you chiming in. As you know, this is conversation and reciprocal. Thank you for chiming in. Now, what I want to give some, look, I want to respond to institutional pressure, okay? And that response cannot only be outrage. Communities need preservation and conservation infrastructure. So now this goes back to when my wife, Mrs. Pearlie, said earlier, now is the time to start documenting. And you've come to the right place, because this is how we work in that space. So what I want to encourage you to do is record elders with informed consent. Preserve original audio files and transcripts. Label photographs with names, dates, locations, and relationships, okay? Save church programs, school yearbooks, funeral programs, organizational records, flyers, any kind of recording in local newspapers. Document clothing and hair practices as culture. Ask people, okay, what garments mean, when were they worn, how meanings change across generations, and how institutions have judged them. Okay? Do not collect only objects. Collect the knowledge. Remember these two terms, tangible and intangible. Now, when it comes to music, document the people, places, labor, worship, migration, and community events surrounding the sound. A recording without context, bless you, can preserve audio while losing history. Community preservation does not excuse public institutions from responsibility, though. We teach responsible stewardship, but in teaching that, we expect and hope that you can go into institutions and implement those practices that they encourage you to implement. It gives communities greater authority when institutions misrepresent them. However, cultural stewardship means retaining ownership, definition, context across with care. Okay? Next slide. As we close, jive turkeys. Tonight's two stories show that cultural conflict often appears through administrative language. Review balance, standards, professionalism, unity, and preparation. What else? Those words can describe legitimate institutional goals. They can also conceal the narrowing of history or the regulation of culture. Our responsibility is to examine how the policy works, not only how officials describe it. Now, I'm being extremely exploited and exaggerated in my expressions right now because this is part of advocacy. And remember, I always say folkloristics and ethnomusicology, as well as sociology and cultural anthropology, is part of advocacy, okay? The Smithsonian situation asks whether political power, I guess you could call the Smithsonian situation a controversy, right? Asks whether, you all right? I thought I heard something fall, sorry. Excuse me, asked whether political power will determine the emotional and ideological boundaries of American history. And remember, you learned about romantic nationalism as we spoke about the Smithsonian situation, right? The Tuskegee situation, that's not a controversy. That's just, I don't even know what to call it. As how a Black institution can prepare students for the world without teaching them to accept anti-Black judgment as neutral professional standards. Meaning, how can we teach you to be professional without assimilated? Okay? And that's a real question, right? This is why we produce cultural and traditional news, people. I don't know if we're reporting it, but we are definitely examining what it means for oral history, folklore, music, material culture, community authority, and the survival of memory to be present in reporting and in news and in traditional and cultural news, right? What I probably will do in the description is give y'all some research and production source appendixes, all right? So that you can check, in other words, citation and an appendix, so that you can find where I'm getting my information, what we're talking about, and stuff like this. This is straight up legitimate, folks. Let me look at my good people's, young man. Thank y'all yet again for another Sunday. Now, I still feel like we're talking at you. This is really a conversation, a forum even. We try to provide information, but we like to discuss with you in real time. Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you, Brother Guy, for and everyone who shares their thoughts as we have these discussions. And appreciate you as well. We'll be here next week. Remember, Substacks is where I synthesize these thoughts for our Sunday talks more. Patreon really is for when we want to go into deep discussions about the courses. That's essentially what our reflection. It's not really a podcast. We're reflecting on the course and your projects and the readings and real life experiences in the field. So become a Patreon member so that you can have these discussions with us and myself. Have a good week. All right. And remember, document and archive. Then make a song about it. Have a good week. See y'all soon. Take care.